from Access Your True Nature. And I would say happy Soul Sunday to you, but it's been a sombering day in world events, and also in looking in that deep down place. So I really wanted to talk today around judgment and expectations and projections again, and this whole thing around this fear-based reality that we're all getting hooked into, whether we like it or not. And this conversation has really been prompted today by a message that I just received from a client that's cat went missing a couple of weeks ago. And it's something that a lot of you probably don't know about me, is that my work is very much based in animal communications. Everything I've kind of learned about being human, I've really continued to learn from animals who are just so generous and patient and forgiving in our humanness, to be in the present moment. Hi Kizzy, nice to see you here. And that she was disappointed with me because unfortunately I haven't been able to track her cat. And this is why I don't really tell people that I do Gestalt tracking anymore. Hi Anjana, nice to see you here. Because it's not in my control other than to interpret the messages, and sometimes it's fast and it's instant and we get the animals back. In other cases, I had a dog once that was taken in a home invasion in Johannesburg, a little spaniel who the robbers actually coaxed into the car and drove off with, and the family were devastated. Even though they had gone through this terrible trauma and lost a lot of physical things, all they wanted was their little dog to come home. And I told them, that we don't always get what we want, and in these cases, and it's very difficult because there's always this emotional attachment. And one of the reasons why I used to offer this work out there publicly is because I know what it feels like to not know what's happened to a beloved, to an animal. I have people asking me to track lost people as well, and it's not something that's easy. It's very painful because we want what we want, and we want it now. And I really just show up in this work to get closure, and also to know that a lot of the time it's not up to us. Animals, like people, have free will and free choice to make their own choices and to experience whatever their experiences are. And I had that with my own cat Satchmo. He went through thick and thin with me. He was moved from home to home after I lost my home in Cape Town and was a wanderer home between homes for a long time. Hi Patricia, nice to see you here. And I did track him. And I spent hours and tears and days walking around my neighborhood, doing all the practical, physical things, looking for my cat. And I did track him. I did find him. I'd bring him home. He would go again. And I didn't want him to leave. I wanted him to stay with me. And it wasn't up to me. Animals come into this world with soul contracts with us. They're here as our teachers to show us how to be present, and also how to let go, and to be in more allowance of what we're all choosing from a place of choice. So why am I telling you about this story? Because a lot of judgment came up, and I know being brave in our lives is very much around that thing. And I can't remember where I heard it, but someone said to me, and it really stuck with me or resonated with me, that the only move that matters is our next one. And sometimes it's in not moving that is the movement. My Tigger and Max. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, Lindsay. Yeah. And this isn't something that I can kind of just hop in and out of. It's something that I really have to go into, and I oftentimes do the Gestalt tracking in the very early hours of the morning. So 2-3 o'clock in the morning is a really good time when the earth energy is very quiet, when people are sleeping, animals are able to come through because our internal clutter is less, and there's less of that consciousness of everybody else's thoughts and feelings and emotions. So I normally track missing animals in the early hours of the morning, and it takes a dedication and a willingness for me to make sure that I am awake to do these sessions, and it's ongoing. And it's one of the reasons why I stopped doing Gestalt tracking or offering it, because it's not like someone comes in for a session and it's in and it's out and they go on with your lives. And yes, there's follow-up and there's feedback. With animals and missing animals and people, I can't get it out of my head. It's not something I can turn on and off. It's something that is constantly pulling at my heartstrings, because I know that we want what we want. And of course, we want our animals to come home to us, and the people that have gone missing to come home to us. And it's not really up to us. So I really wanted to just talk a little bit more about Judgement today, in light of, you know, this latest terror attack in the UK. And I don't normally watch the news, but I turned on the news because my husband said, oh boy, there's been another attack in London. And I come from a place of not being pulled into the story, the work, the mindfulness, the place of practicing inner presence and clearing my mind is something that is a constant practice for me. But I kind of looked at this whole story unfolding again, and just I was really fascinated by how the media hype everything up into this frenzy of fear-based response. We have it in our neighborhood as well. It's like everybody kind of goes on with their business. Everyone is aware of the crime in our neighborhood, and yet 10% of my neighborhood actually pay for the armed guard to guard our street. The people that are the first to complain and object are the ones that actually are those sit back and wait and sees, and they kind of ride off of other people investing in safety and security. And I think, without making this sound like a rant, what if you didn't have to make yourself wrong? And what if you didn't have to make other people wrong in the choices that they're creating? You know, judgment is such a big part of what's going on in the crazy of the world right now. And I think that it's this place where we're not willing to sit with the parts that are uncomfortable. You know, there's so much wrongness, isn't there, about who we think we are and what we're supposed to be doing, and where we should be at, and how things should be showing up. And here's the thing, judgment never creates. Judgment never creates. It always shuts us down. It closes our hearts. It stops us from receiving. And when we're in judgment, when we're pointing fingers, when we're going into blame and shame and regret and all those other distractor implants, they actually do exactly what they are. They pull us into this heavy vibration, and we shut down. So we're not able to contribute from a place of defending our point of view. You know, you're not wrong. I just want you to know you're not wrong. I'm not wrong. You know, I was really triggered by that. And I was also saddened by the fact that I went into the wrongness of me, that, oh my gosh, how could I have done more? I'm still tracking this lost animal. I never stop. Hi, Lena. I never stop looking. I never stop tuning in. But it comes when it comes. If that animal is in danger, if that animal, hi, Lena, nice to see you here. If that animal is in shock and trauma, if they are hurt, I can pick that up, but they don't often communicate. And also, it's pretty cryptic. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. You know, I once had a case where they had no idea what had happened to this animal, and when I tuned in and I had their picture and I started Gestalt tracking, I could just smell this really strong smell of basil, the herb basil. And I don't censor. I've learned not to censor. I've learned to not make anything that comes through me wrong. And yet here I am today, sitting in this place of wrongness of, you know, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just get this information and get this cat back to her human mama? And you know, in that case of that missing dog, I said, hey, you know, because I'd prepped them beforehand, and I'd said, look, it doesn't always make sense. This is where we have to kind of put our heads together and do a bit of sleuthing Does the name Basil mean anything to you? And we went through this dialogue, and it turned out that the dog was in Basil Street. There's a lot of Basils when you start to look at it, but it really is about, getting information, and also knowing that we misinterpret through our own filters and our own projections and everything else. And I want you to just encourage you today, as I'm sitting here in this wrongness of me for 2 seconds just now, about what could I do different? How can I make this right? Is how can I create a greater change in the world from not making myself wrong? How are we all being in this world? We're a lot more connected than we think we are, when we are all borderlands. If you go into the gene code and you start looking at your ancestral lineage, a lot of the time we're a lot more alike than we are separate. And I think this is where we're seeing people with really operating from this fear-based place of oppressing others, what we are actually oppressing in ourselves. And it can feel like a very painful thing that starts to own you when you come from the wrongness of it. And, the more that I kind of watch how people are functioning in the world, and where people are judging me and others, and where I do go into judgment based on this place of, and I love this, and this is just a little side note, is that people don't disappoint us. This girl said, you really disappointed me. And I went straight into, oh my gosh, how can I make that right? How can I get her to love me? How can I get her to know that I'm doing the best that I possibly can? I start to function from that place of noticing the tripwire, noticing the trigger, and then looking at, wow, how can I discover more about myself without having to make myself wrong? And what in me feels it needs to be loved and accepted or enough, instead of knowing that I actually am love, that I don't have to prove something. Thank you for the hearts. I hope this is making sense, because sometimes I just kind of, I don't know. But anyway, I keep going without trying to make me wrong in making sense of the unsenseless or uncommon sense of it. But I just kind of wanted to share that with you today, is where are you making yourself wrong? You imagine how different life could be when we really start to see through all these lies that we're living in, because we don't quite see ourselves. And so we need to prove that we're lovable. So we start projecting the hurt. I get that there's a lot of hurt underneath the attack that was projected at me, that I hadn't done enough, or that she was disappointed, and then the validation of how much she paid for my services, and I could feel myself wanting to go into defending the rightness of my point of view. And I always say, I'd rather be willing to be wrong and free than right and having to defend my point of view. So what if we could look at ourselves from being love, to love yourself, in not overlooking how many people are in a space of not love, or that that I have to give myself up, or I have to do me different to try and prove that I'm lovable, or that I am acceptable, or I am that sort of approval trap that we all kind of fall into. And look at it with compassion and the kindness, which is what animals have always given to me, is the willingness to be patient, and the willingness to just be in my world, because we are so busy in our minds all the time. And it does affect our animals. It affects our animals who are so sensitive to the busyness of our minds, that sometimes it's just too much for them. It's too intense, and they have to put some space between them and us in order to keep themselves healthy. And I've seen animals take on human disease, including a mental and emotional tripping that we do, in order for us to actually get peace of mind. I've seen animals take on all sorts of kind of disease, and this is showing up more in thyroid issues, because if you're not feeling like your voice is being heard, or you don't feel validated, or you can't speak your truth, a lot of times animals that are in your life, and I'm talking about domestic animals, they'll take on our disease, and it's showing up as more diabetes, more sugar imbalances in animals, more tumors, more growths, more thyroid issues. because they are so generous in how they give, and they are so forgiving because they're also not attached to their human bodies, the way that we are. They know that life never ends. It's just a continuation of a different energy form. So, what if you didn't have to need to try to fix and prove from lack that you need to be what people think you are? And it has nothing to do with you a lot of the time. And always in lack, if we can't move toward loving ourselves from the inside, how do we stop making ourselves wrong and other people wrong on the outside? This is all the assumptions that we make and the projections that we make about ourselves and about other people and about the way the world is and all the chaos. And what you focus on always expands. So, fear begets fear. This is why I don't belong to anti-poaching and anti-cruelty societies, because you're actually you're fueling the fire that keeps that thing bigger than you. Anti-drugs, anti-cancer. You are not a survivor. You are a creator. So the minute that you start making yourself bigger than something else bigger than you, and this includes money, you have to go into fight, flight, freeze. You're in survival mode, and you're saying, I have to prove that I am bigger than this thing. So just remember, you're not who other people think you are. And it's okay. That's just what we've been trained. It's the bad training of this reality that we have to unlearn, and we have to unhook from the matrix to really go back into a place of loving ourselves, not from a lack of self-acceptance and self-approval. This is the self-soothing. This is all the places we are creators. Absolutely. Hi, Kelly. Nice to see you here. So I know this is super heavy. I like to go deep down, as many of you know. So thank you for being here with me, and thank you for sharing this. It's just like the only way that we are going to get to create positive change in the world, and I think it's change without putting a negative or positive hook on it. It's just like, how can we start to change the world? We'll start changing how you love yourself from the inside. Stop judging you on the inside. Hi, Celeste. That everyone was wrong. Yeah. And isn't it interesting, Celeste, because I kind of find the best way to come from a loving, allowing place of acceptance. So it's not tolerance, which means that you have to still prove that you're right. It's just to tell that person that they're right. People can't hear what they can't hear. So oftentimes that's one of the questions they'll ask is, what can this person hear, not what they're willing to hear. And the kindest way for yourself and to love others is just to say, you know what, you're right. Or as I said to this girl in this case, it's like, I understand how upset you are. How can I make this right for you? And I apologize. So it doesn't mean that it's true. So don't buy it as true, but give the person what they need without making it personal. It's just an interesting point of view. It's just an interesting point of view. Is this making sense? I hope so. Does anyone have any kind of questions? Because I really want to just want to share this from a really vulnerable place of I made myself feel, I was gutted. I felt so bad. I felt like I'd let her down. I felt like I'd failed, actually. And it's like, what if it's not about you? And when it is, be big enough to just make it right for the other person. It's just like, we choose what we choose, and we can only hear what we can hear, and we get it when we get it. So just remember, you're not what other people think you are, right? It's just an interesting point of view. So can you feel and embrace and embody a new level of connection for yourself without getting other people's opinion of you first to find love? Stop seeking approval. And this is a 10-second increment practice for me of, wow, interesting point of view. I feel about myself. What is required here? And I ask my body too. And when I found myself feeling wrong today, what I believe I was able to step out of the decisions, the judgments, the conclusions, the computations, all the mind fucking that I was doing, is I just asked, what is this? What is this? Universe, show me what is required here. What is truly possible here from a place of being gentle, of being in allowance, which is one of the 5 cornerstones of conscious relationship. So it's so easy to have something show up, and it always kind of is the whammy. It always kind of comes out of nowhere. Last conversation I had with this woman, for example, she was in total allowance of I know, and today it was like the complete unside of that, and I went straight into going into the wrongness of it. So ask yourself, ask your body, instead of making your body wrong, instead of making your gut intuitive knowing wrong, get out of your head, clear some space so that you can start to ask, how do I need to show up to receive this information? Belief we don't need to believe in ourselves. Just by you being you is believable. You are visible proof of our own infinite being in a physical body. And what we need is to take brave action. And sometimes that action on the outside could be projected back to you as you're not doing enough, or you're shit at this, or you're a fraud. And there's a lot of fraud patrol around at the moment, if you hadn't noticed, and a lot of imposter syndrome also. So be aware and allow your body to contribute to asking, making you aware of where there are false prophets, where you are trying to buy a lie and making it true, and that's just force, and that's a lot of effort. And just ask what's true for you. Take the brave action. Jekyll and Hyde thing. Yeah, and that's really the contrast too, I think, of where we go into so much opposition, and that is the war, and that is the factions, and the tribal warring in Africa is very much about that. It's just like when we really come back to it, and there's a beautiful channel, and there's some great videos, and I'll try and post it below, but I think it's called The Ancestral Experiment, where they interviewed a whole lot of different people from different countries, and they asked them various questions, and it was all very patriotic. It's just like, well, I live in England and I fought for my country, and I'm as British as it comes. And actually when they did the saliva testing on all these people, the looks on their faces and the softening and the relief to actually know that I actually am no different to you. I think that is what's so important about the shadow work and the mirroring, is that we get to really start to look at ourselves from a place of softening, of coming back to the heart, of being able to go deep down and get out of the judgment. The No Judgment Diet is one of my best-selling courses. It's not a weight loss program, but it's about ending the weight of judgment. And of course, when we start letting go of all the baggage that we think is ours to carry, and we just begin to show up in this peaceful presence, and we tread gently on ourselves, everything lightens up. And I've been talking a lot recently about the importance of, not forgetting where you came from. Never forget where you came from or helped you along the way. It doesn't take much to acknowledge and appreciate the contribution that we have, even from people who are judging us. And yes, our natural instinct is to defend it, or either align and agree with it. And what if we didn't have to do either of those things? What if we could just show up and know that even those painful moments, even though you can't change what's happened to you, you can change how you move through it, how you impart your knowledge and your wisdom through story without making it an identity, right? You are not your stories. Your stories are your growing pains. And they remind us how to stay the course, to keep in our compass direction. And they're also like this beacon of shining light to others, to give hope and inspiration, and know that they can find their way through it as we did. And it's about returning to love. This is what I believe, and this is where my work is so deeply rooted in healing at the level of the nervous system. Because until we actually start to have compassion and self-love and self-acceptance and radical devout practice of how many ways can I love myself today, then we can start to love the external mirroring and our environment to the parts of ourselves that we don't love. Does that make sense? So just remember, those thoughts, the beliefs, the decisions, the judgments, the conclusions, and all the thinking that you've done about it, they always keep you smaller than you really are. Those stories that aren't yours, the burdens that aren't yours to carry. I love that question. Who does it belong to? Is this mine? And this is the work I cover in the shadow dancing classes, is looking at where are you going into assumptions? Where are you turning in on yourself? This is the chronic mystery diseases that I see. This is the autoimmune diseases that I see in clients that show up here. It's literally your cells are attacking themselves because we create that, right? We become the things that we think. Our thoughts create the actions, and the feelings create the physical. So if we can create all that and start to acknowledge the alchemy, that we are magic, that we are all have our own medicine, then we can start to heal from the inside out. And that way, it really does start with us. When you can let go of all the stuff where you think you either need to fit in or fuck off, as most people say, you don't need everyone to like you. You don't have to be a people pleaser, which is something that I know very well. And you don't have to run away from it because you don't like it, because it makes you feel uncomfortable. You don't have to go into that fight-flight response. And when we let go, when we make room for growth, when we create spaces for healthy parts of us to emerge, we allow ourselves to occupy more space, to stretch and to renew and to regenerate and to grow. We're not holding and contracting and trying to hold on to old parts and pieces that no longer are serving us, and that actually maybe were not yours in the first place. And it's kind of like a snake that needs to shed its skin to grow into a new, more beautiful skin, right? Because we learned through our experiences of changing shape and form. And this is where, again, coming back to animals, cats choose their own coats. I didn't know that until I had a conversation with one of them. Animals choose different experiences just like we do, and yet we come from this place of assumption that animal needs saving. When we see a dog running around in traffic, it makes us want to go and save ourselves, right? Because we want to save other people and other animals as a way, because we're perhaps waiting for someone to come and save us. No one's coming to save you, because you don't need saving. You just need to return to love. Come back to your heart and love yourself. Love whatever arises from that place. So animals can give us a lot of amazing lessons if we're just quieting ourselves down enough to hear them and know that it's not up to us. Yes, cats and dogs and domestic animals have shared our lives right back from the times when wolves and horses came into the world and opened up territories and kept us warm and pulled sleds, and we have that ancestral knowing in our genes, and yet we have forgotten to listen to our animal body, to the critters, the animals big and small in our lives. We've become so insulated and so superior in our judgments and projections of that we are so much more superior than other races, species, and this is where we see ranking, right, and what's going on in the world today. So be willing to be brave enough to know when you're too tight, when it's time to grow a new skin, not get a thicker skin, not close your heart, but be willing to shed your old skin that may be too small for you, to let go of people that are not a contribution to your life, and be willing to be wrong and free rather than right, and having to defend your point of view, which is so exhausting. It's so exhausting. So I'm in this process right now where I'm really breaking down all the things that I'm not, that I thought I was, and it's another layer of unburdening. It's another layer of shedding shedding skin to make room for something more amazing for myself, and allowing myself to fall apart a lot quicker, and you know, reintegrate it and transmorph and transform into something greater than I could ever imagine. And it's a surprise, because it's kind of like there's always more growth, there's always more room, there's more breathing room when we start to allow ourselves to expand. And I've been quite surprised at the stillness in my connection to myself on a much deeper level. It's a different level. I can't quite explain it. But it's been quite a shock for me to actually acknowledge how much I didn't see in myself, about how connected I already am with myself. And I'm wondering, you know, where you're willing to be brave today to actually just start to see that, just like me, you know, just being with myself. Since I broke my ribs and I've been a little bit more restricted in my mobility, I've had to sit. Okay, it's not even been choice, although the choice to break, you know, whatever my body decided to do to stop me so that I could just sit with myself in my discomfort, to be able to really look at the parts that I was still judging. I've been able to see these changes in myself from an entirely different way, and start to be in appreciation and more allowance and more acceptance of not just myself and how I love myself, but also from how other people are functioning from love, or actually the opposite. So the inside of love is unlove. So that's my sort of Sunday soul medicine for you today. I would love to know if you have anything to contribute to this conversation, and if it's been useful. So post your comments below, and if you have any insights on how to set yourself free to end this sort of weight of judgment and projection and assumption, and stop hurting yourself by making it all personal, like I did this afternoon when I got that message. Keep the rituality of honoring yourself enough to tread gently on yourself, tread gently on the land, tread gently on your body, and honor where you're at, love where you are, and know that you don't have to make yourself wrong. All right, I love you guys. Thank you for joining me. Have a beautiful rest of the day wherever you are. Bye. Mwah.